Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can I still say Happy New Year, or is it okay? Happy New Year. Um, yeah. Before I start, Mr. Yancey just said, you are in a great financial position to address some immediate needs, and then also possibly some future needs down the road. So this the presentation. It's not set in stone, but it is, if you were to do some of the financings, it may look like and if the board chooses, then we can fine tune in terms of repayment in terms and whatnot. So this was at least a starting point from my end to address, like I said, future or immediate needs, and then maybe some future needs. I want to talk about the project thresholds because whether a project is controlled or not will determine the timeline. Take a look at the existing debt, just a brief discussion on general obligation bonds. We had discussed, there's a project, and I think is it with PS?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, PSG, possibly 17 million, maybe at the top end. So that I used that number, and then just a quick discussion on future project or projects. So the thresholds, and these are the statutes. There are two statutes, House and Roll Act. Okay, I need to step back and preface. This is all, this discussion is conditioned on everything staying equal. In terms of what these thresholds are, and no changes coming with this session. There has been talk about some making changes to some of the thresholds or not. And so, if Kristen has any more insight or not, but there will be changes. There definitely will be changes in property tax. There's going to be more than likely a change in the base rate for ag, and then there will be a change in terms of how general obligations and general obligation bonds and the frequency or when you can issue them. So we'll know more as we progress, but assuming that everything is where we are, okay, as of now. So House Enrolled Act 1043, that's the one where you can, in terms of setting a controlled project, it's the lesser of 1% of your gross assessed value, or a number that the DLGF gives, and it's essentially was the 5 million in 2018, and its multiplier has grown by the growth rate to today. And then the other was put into effect as House Bill 1499. Essentially said if you have a debt rate 40 cents or under, then 1043 applies. If it's between 40 cents and 80 cents, it's subject to petition remonstrance. If it's 80 cents and over, it's an immediate, or it is a referendum issue. Okay? So your rate's at 37 cents. And so we go with 1043. And 1043 says a controlled project is the lesser of 1% of your gross assessed value, or for 2025, it's little over 6.6 million. These are the taxing districts that comprise the school corporation. Although you have your certified net for 2025, the gross has not been posted yet. It's out there, it just hasn't been posted. And it should be any day now. I keep checking. They have on Gateway, they have the site is up, and it hasn't been put on there yet. But so for Pay 24, it was almost 2.9 million. So 1% of that is 28.7. If you were to do a $17 million project, that would be a controlled project. And essentially what happens with that is you, it adds one more meeting in 30 days to the timetable. And then if the board elects, Ice Miller Christen would put together a timetable that would lead us through all the statutory requirements for that project. Section 2 is taking a look at the existing debt. And so I went back. So the Common School Fund loan that matured last year. So then we had the 13 bonds, the 14 bonds, the 17, the 20. There was a GO issue in 22, the 24 GO issue, and excuse me, the 24 first mortgage bonds, and then what they were used for. I think you all know that I like pictures, and so this shows the existing debt. The gray it's all existing, but the gray was through last year, and then we did GO issue with 3 maturities. Then we also did the first mortgage bonds, and the whole goal of that was to kind of get the rate up. That was the levy. This is the rate. Kind of keep it level, and then create troughs or whatever for possible future projects. Your certified value for 26 is $1.7 billion. I did not make any assumptions for growth. You've had growth in your assessed value over the last few years. So I'm very conservative in my estimates. If there is growth, and if the levy stays the same and the growth occurs, the denominator gets bigger, you could see that rate drop even more. Okay, but so everything going forward is assuming no growth. Okay? And then when we add everything together, you've got the debt, we've got some pension bonds that paid off or paying off, and then your operation fund. And again, you can see we've been pretty careful and kind of almost methodical here over the last few years in trying to keep everything at around $1 and no more. With all of our projects that we've done, it's been to take care of needs, and then also, in terms of the term and the payments and whatnot, to create these troughs to allow the community, the school corporation, if there are needs, to do projects and not increase the rate. So going back even through 220, we've been, some of those dips or whatever, especially 22, that's when we had those, greater than expected assessed value growth. So that's, but we've been pretty consistent in trying to keep it around $1. And you can see, though, debt and whatnot is going to be coming off. So after 26, 27, 27, 28, there's going to be drops. I'm going to touch on general obligation bonds here just quickly. And Kristen, you might have some insight on this, but we've used general obligation bonds. We've used those to do some projects and pay them off quickly. In order to help with on the operation side and also to kind of control the rate, this is the statute that it's easier to say what they can't be used than what they can be used for. And just real quickly, you can't pay salaries, you can't pay pensions, and you can't pay utilities. Other than that, you can essentially use them. There is a calculation for that, and that is it's 1/3 to 2% of your certified net minus any existing GO that you have. So the 1.7 billion, 2% of that's 35 million. A third of that is 11.7 million. There is so you've got there was the pension that come off this year. So there's the pension, and then there were the 22 and 24 issue, and that's where of 7.6. So you have, in terms of GO capacity, 4 million. Now, That increases as the pension come off this year, and then as we pay off the 22 and the 24, and if your AV goes up, then your capacity is going to go up. And I'll touch on that a little bit later when we look at. I'm sorry? Yes. Yeah.
You'll have $11 billion just in that mechanism in 2027.
In capacity. In capacity.
So those are easy bonds to issue.
Is it accurate to say the governor envisions capping tax rates at the Department of Tax, but assessed values could continue to climb?
Well, there may also they may also cap. We're talking about capping the percentage or percentage growth on that, right?
Yeah, so I think right now what we've been focusing on, like last fall, we would have said that the legislature was going to focus on your ability to issue, but you're right, what they focused on really is the growth in assessed valuation and maintaining tax rates, right? Like we have all done for years because of the pressure on the operations fund. So right now, there were several bills. We're still early in session. We have until April 24th. But right now, what they are really doing is trying to bring that assessed valuation of each of our homes, right? It's a focus on homes right now, down. By like in one bill, it was like instead of a $45,000 homestead credit, it was like $65,000. So that's how they're trying to bring it down. Again, there's been a lot of amendments. Another one that we'll talk about as we go through is there's an amendment, as you know right now, your operations fund, you can't increase it, where you could with debt service by going through the process we'll talk about through issuing bonds. You really can't increase the levy on operations fund.
And always remember, it doesn't matter if you have 2 schools or 10 schools. It's the same we can tax.
In operations,
In
yes.
operations. That's
And so for years, there's been this maximum levy growth quotient, or MLGQ, where you would get, I think of it as sort of like a COLA on Social Security. You'd get this percentage, and sometimes like in North Lawrence, it might be 8%, 9%, 10%, where your ops fund could then grow 8, 9, 10%. But a few years ago, they came in and they said, no, we're going to set a maximum levy growth quotient, an MLGQ, at 4%, for example. Right now, legislation is saying 0 growth in 2026, 1% in 27, 2 in 28, and then a new formula thereafter that we don't know. So I think that's really the purpose of our meeting tonight is if you get these pressures of Senate Bill 1 with the MLGQ and lowering of AV, what other levers do you have to pull? Great question.
So let's take a look at a $17 million, again, just for discussion purpose, $17 million project. If we were to issue 17 million, the bulk of it, 16.2, would be used for construction. And now we're still early on. This is again for discussion. There's going to be construction hard costs, which essentially is brick and mortar, and then everything else associated with a construction project. If there's going to be equipment or technology or fees or everything else that's not brick and mortar would be the soft cost to it. So, but grouping 16.2, capitalized interest of about 487,000, and I can talk about that in 1 second. And then all of the costs to do a bond issue, no more than $295,000. Just kind of keep in mind that there are going to be some other costs. I think we've been through projects if we were to do a bond issue. So assuming we do an issue this spring, fall, or spring, summer, or so, I'm assuming a 5% interest rate. The Fed has gone into a monetary easing policy where they have reduced the federal funds rate, and rates have come down. Although there's over the last couple of months, there have been some inflationary data that has come out, and so they're kind of what they call a hawkish it's depending on further rate reductions are going to be depending on what inflation data come up. But 5% is safe for a 20-year, an average 5% for 20-year. We're not even going to be that, as you can see. If we were to do something, it would be in the 12, 13-year range. So I'm using a higher than normal or market rate for these. I'm also, as I said, not growing the assessed value for this. So there's the existing debt in the gray. If we were to do a bond issue here in 2025, we could have payments starting in 2026. Bond issues that are paid by property taxes in Indiana have debt payments that are due in January and in July. And I think we've had this discussion, but just to kind of refresh, and that's on purpose because we pay our taxes in November and May, and you get your funds in December and June, and then you go ahead and you make your payments for January and July. And so we could, or we would have, if we sold bonds this year, first payment would be in July or in January, and then July of 26, or January of 26 and July of 26. Well, to collect and make a payment for January, you would had to put it in your budget last year, and wasn't a project. This wasn't even an idea. So we're going to that 400, that little cross-hatched. That's the interest portion for the payment. That's capitalized interest. We're going to take that money, we're going to put it with the trustee. Trustee is going to use that, and they're going to make the payment for January. And then if the board decides to go through with this budget, we will put in this budget to collect in June to make a July and January payment for next year. So that's what capitalized interest is. So this is the debt service budget. And then when you take a look at the debt service rate, you can see we go up. I'm going to try to keep it again, maybe under the 40 cents there, but around 40 cents. And you can see, so 26, small payment, 27, a little larger payment. And then there's I mirrored the payment, again, just for discussion, to kind of follow how the existing debt is coming off. Okay, so then there's a drop, then a drop in 33 to 34. Could very easily increase those payments, shorten, but we can have that discussion down the road. So that, an anticipated payment stream, essentially keeping that rate at around from 37 to about 40, or trying to keep it at 40 or under below. So then when we add the total, the operation fund and whatnot, so is this what? So this red is the pension, this would be the new, this is operation, and then depending on what legislation may be using general obligation bonds if you want, or as you can see, it sets up really nicely. There's a nice drop between 27 and 28, and then 33 and 34 for maybe a future project. And so it's a great segue into what in terms of a future project. And so looking at just the debt service fund, the gray is the existing. The blue would be this 25 issue. We get the rate, you can see in 26, 27, and then you could possibly, the whole goal here is to kind of get everything up to around, increase the overall rate from, it's at 92 now, back up to, over a couple of years, up to maybe around 99 cents. Okay, so again, just so we would do the 25 project, and then as soon as 27, you could do a larger, say, 50 million, with payments starting in 28, and that's the red. And then again, it kind of mirrors. We'll have payments through 33, then we create a trough, and then those issues would have to be 20 years if you wanted to do that much. And then we could look at another project maybe in 23, or I'm sorry, in 33 with payments starting in 34. Again, smaller payments and then larger payments as the debt drops off, and then that light blue would be the possibility of maybe general obligation bonds or other debt or something to kind of keep the overall. We would get the rate up to about 44 cents or so, the debt service rate, kind of keep it up there. Again, there's no growth factor for the AV. And then when we add the operation fund, and then now the geo debt in the light blue, try to keep everything up around 99 cents. Try to keep, and so, like I said, we've been very deliberate in all of the issues that we've done over the last few years, not going out 20, not doing big issues where we've had, kept that rate up. We've created these little troughs that allow this opportunity, this flexibility, that if you want, you can do that. If not, you can always shorten the pay. I mean, the ability to do $17 million and pay it off in 10 years or 12 years is pretty, pretty good. And if we wanted to, we could probably even, if there wasn't anything down the road, if you're like, yeah, that's great, but this keeps us, for the next 10 years, well, then we make sure that we kind of keep those payments kind of higher for 10 years and then create a trough. But that's, I think, as you go and talk with PSG and how, what do we need to do now, and then what's the, what's the lifespan, or what do we need, what's next, and when is next coming, and then once we know that, then we can we'll make sure that we structure the payments to do that. So again, in a really good position, you can see there's a lot of flexibility for you, I think, to pretty much address anything that you want or may need to.
David, the lead time, so let's say we wanted to do a $27 million project, $50 million project, $27 million. When would we need to decide on that? Say go. 6 months lead time, 1 year lead time?
More.
2.
Yeah, it would be at least 18 months with the design time for a project that large.
Next summer, or this summer, next summer. We'd have to have
So
this.
is PSG then doing, I think I heard a study for 6 months, 8 months, is that?
We're trying to get it done in 6.
Okay.
Because I need it soon.
Are they going to address, okay, this takes care of stuff now, what's,
They'll have a rating of all their buildings and a list of what needs to be done in each building.
and when,
Well,
Or-
then they would have to decide which building they want to pick first to address. As they know, they have 2 buildings that are probably, let's just this amount of money to run them. Now, how many businesses run on that? I think all of you would say no business runs on that. So I'm preaching to the choir because anybody watching the superintendents know the ludicrous of how this has been done over the last 20 years in our state. And I think they would admit to that. I mean, I couldn't run my household like that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think there was some flexibility. Then the last 2 years they capped it at 4%, and I mean, you know what's happened inflation-wise in 20 to now. You know, prices go up. You know, interest rates going to do this, but and yes, we may get a handle on inflation, the rate of inflation, but we've gone from here to here. And we're not coming back down here. I mean, we're here. This is where we are now.
20 years ago, you were at $1.05. I really believe that's what your tax rate should be. We're never going to get to $1 because of all the caps they put on us. I mean, we could try whatever to raise the tax. It's not going to happen. So you have to live within your means that the state has given us. So I have to come up with proposals that reduce your operations cost. That's why I'm telling Dennis right away with PSG. We have to figure out how to reduce utilities by at least 15%. Or your operations fund is going to be in trouble in a few years, especially what the state might be doing to the legislation. And we're not the only corporation that's worried about this. But the ones that plan, and I know some of them have planned to reduce operation costs, they have a little easier way through this. If you haven't planned to reduce your operations, I have a feeling you're in trouble. Those corporations that haven't planned. And we have to start planning to reduce operation costs, or I'm not doing my job to you or this community, because it's coming. Yeah. And this is only my opinion. I'm not speaking for North Lawrence. I'm speaking for a taxpayer that has watched this happen to public schools over 34 years. And any questions, or you're in great shape though, I just want to say.
Is this a best case scenario, or is there something that could throw this into chaos?
There is. Legislation could throw it into chaos, and I think that's why, you have to decide like how you can have the most flexibility. And I think that going through with what we know now and what you were always going to do is my recommendation to give you levers to pull. You would go through a process like we've done for the last several years where, and I have a timetable to go through that with you. But what it would be is you guys as a board will always own whether and when you move forward. But you have to have the authority to move forward, right? So let's say that a bill is passed that throws it out of whack, and you all were talking, even though I was here just 20 minutes, I heard about all the cost savings you're trying to do in operations. This would just give you the ability to have options if there's going to be options, but you would always own the decision. Like if something happens and it would increase your tax rate too much to move forward, you can stop. If you authorize 10 million, you could choose to only issue 1 million for maybe a roof, and then you could stop. This doesn't force you. If you take these proceedings, it doesn't force you to issue the bonds, but it gives you an option to be able to issue if you would like to. Does that answer your question?
There's always something unforeseen.
Always. Yeah.
Well, just plan on every 2 years when they meet. So, I mean, just plan for change.
And what we
Pretty much every year with the legislature, but every 2 years as they meet, and it ends up being whatever budget session, that something is there's going to be a change.
So what we do is we do work with our schools. Like right now, we know that there has to be cost savings in operations. Some of our schools already, without the hit in some of these bills, They already are only paying for insurance and diesel out of operations, everything else. They're already too tight. They can't afford to pay for anything else. So it is, how do you come up with operational savings, whether it's alternative energies or LED lighting or new HVAC systems, all those things to try to reduce that operations. So what I brought with me tonight, and again, this is really just an example of what it would look like. This is not set in stone. Oh, thank you, Kevin. So this is not set in stone. I'm gonna keep this, Greg. Sorry, I needed myself. I'm so sorry. So this isn't set in stone, but this is like one of the tools that we would recommend that you have, especially in North Lawrence. So generally, when we look out at school corporations across the state, we don't see many in the same situation you're in, with that debt paying off so quickly. A lot of schools have debt that goes out the full 20 years from now, right? Because you're allowed under state law to take out debt for 20 years. So when we look at a lot of school corporations, they're maxed out, and they're maxed out for quite a while. So what this would be is, if you choose to do approvals for a bond issue, this would be the quickest that you could go through the process. So that's what I did. I just said, if they wanted to move as quickly as possible, what would it look like? You'll see, and what I wanted to point out regarding options, and then also always owning the decision as a board, is it takes approximately, we have to have 2 hearings, so that's about 2 months. And then after you have those hearings, we do have to wait, publish a notice and wait 30 days. And so here you'll see that if we moved as quickly as possible, the end of the 30 days would be May 19th. I kept going to just give you an idea of how many months it would take in case you had a project that you really wanted to do in mind. But on this May 19th date, we would get a certification from the clerk that nothing was filed, or if something was filed on May 20th, and we could also hold. But that would give you the approval, the flexibility to make decisions on whether or not to move forward in the future. So again, just to go through that, going through your hearings and waiting the 30 days, and then getting that certificate from the clerk, that's really the most important things that you can do to give yourselves options. The rest of the steps I put in there just shows you that it takes Greg and I approximately 3 to 4 months past that just to get through the additional legal steps. But every portion of this, so if you decide to go out with $10 million and you decided to issue a couple $1 million a year from this approval, we would come back every single time to you. If you decide to issue it all at once, we'd come back once. It truly gives you the most flexibility. And I know that some of you have been through this process before, but I really wanted to come tonight in case you had any questions, both on the legislative piece and the process piece.
And this timeline would apply whether it's 11 million, 17 million, 50 million, this would be roughly the same timeline.
Correct. Correct. And you'll see it takes approximately, and one of the questions you had asked was about how long would it take for a large project. We like, before you start the true design time, to go ahead and go through the legal process up front so that you at least know what your parameters are. And that way you know that you're through the 30-day wait period before you start paying an architect or an energy provider to start getting the documents ready for bid. So that's why we build in about 18 months for new projects, because it's about 6 months in legal steps, and then we assume 12 months to be ready to bid.
And I have started putting together needs in the district, and I can read them off because it all deals with working with reducing our operation costs. We have to do an LED project. That is saving money. That should have been done years ago. Controls at B&L, we have no control of the HVAC and heating there. told,
I was saying that already, for some of the, I'll say, small projects you mentioned.
yeah, PSG, the big projects, we have to have the data where we would go, and I told Dennis, former superintendent, only been retired for a few years, so he's been through all this. That's why I like, Dennis, he's been in the job, and, I have a group of superintendents throughout the state speak with over a period of time, and, I think we have to give the board scenarios. This is this scenario, second scenario, third scenario, then you guys, because we have to have the community involved in this. And then you guys will tell me, you might like the scenario, no, I wanna change this, and then you come up with, in a work session, what we're going to do, and then we issue the bond and we make it happen. And, I think, I'm gonna give recommendations, but it's flexible, you're in charge. I work for you and the community, so, you have a lot of need. This is not my first rodeo in operations, so that's probably my expertise as an administrator. And I've worked in some buildings that were very neglected in their lifetime in other corporations. And it took us, one corporation, 6 years to get the buildings halfway decent. And I'm very proud of that era that I dealt with operations. So I think it's easy to do here. Actually, you have better opportunity than previous districts I worked at that didn't have the bonding capability that you have. So, it's exciting. And we have a good group up here that's had experience, so it'll be,
All right, thank you. For the sake of time, I probably need to press on.
Yep. And one more present, any questions?
All right, thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you.
I do want to, so like I said, there is no assumptions for growth. If you continue the growth, it could accelerate the time. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we were talking. You went from 1.5 to 1.7 billion in 1 year, 200 million in 1 year. That's huge. There are school corporations whose total AV is 200 million. So just that it could accelerate this. Shut down.
No, I don't. Thank you all for having us.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Damien, are one of these yours?
I don't have cooties. You can.
I don't even know which one. Good to see you. So nice to meet you. Good to meet you as well. We will, thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Okay, please.
So a few months ago, you allowed us to do a look at our operations and his office, and GA Benefits was here and helped us. And Nancy's gonna go through, we gave you the study and your FYI last month, but we're starting to implement some of that recommendation, so we wanted to take time to go through that with you real quick.
Yeah, thank you for your time tonight. We would like to walk you through our HR and finance strategic plan, as you already mentioned. You've already seen JA Benefits presentation. And also tonight, I want to go ahead and introduce, we have Sandy Brinson here from JA Benefits. They've been a wonderful partner. I found out we were already working with them, I think, 3 months or so after I was here. And after that, I was so excited, and I've called them numerous times, and we've got through some stuff, but it's been a really wonderful partnership. So it made sense that when we wanted to look at this, to ask them to join us. So she's going to be here tonight and help present and answer your questions. So we're going to look at this strategic plan. It focuses on strengthening our operations. We also want to increase our retention and ensure long-term sustainability. Our goal is to build on recent successes while addressing systemic challenges that impact our efficiency, our compliance, and also our employee experience. I also want to stress we've done this also with the finance team. We have broken down that silo that was there between the HR and finance. Fatima's done a wonderful job with the finances, And she's been never daunted by any of the challenges that have crept up. But the other thing I appreciate is she's been very collaborative. We've had lots of discussions about where we overlap. So let's hopefully we'll see if this works. Hey, perfect. So first, I want to thank the board. When I came on, one of the charges that was given to our HR team was that you wanted to increase recruiting and retention, especially of our teachers, our certified staff. The other thing, too, was I remember one of the board members very clear, we needed employee advocacy. They wanted us to rebuild the relationships with our employees. They had heard things and issues and challenges and the stress that they were facing, and they asked us to meet those needs. And so that's one thing that we've tried to do. I also appreciate Mr. Yancey recognizes to take care of our students, we have to take care of our employees. And so that's been something that we've really focused on. Now we want to ensure that our HR and finances teams, the teams very responsible for supporting all our staff, are structured and resourced appropriately to sustain these efforts and continue improving employee satisfaction and retention across all the roles. And so one of the things, oh gosh, I went through the whole thing. That's probably how you wish I'd go through the whole thing. It was right there. Well, let's see here. I don't know. Oh, that's he said to flip back, but that doesn't seem to be either. Well, also, you just have this. If you go ahead into your FYI packets, I put the slide deck in there. So go ahead and open that up. I'll give you a moment to open that up. Well, that's a good question. Yes, that's it. Yeah. Yeah, in that packet, you should have that, and then also the whole strategic plan, and then also one of the compensation models we're presenting tonight. If anybody still has trouble, I got some printed ones. Did you get them? Okay. We're on slide 3. Getting ready to go. And we're starting to talk about slide 3. Wrapping up 2 and getting ready for 3. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, I gommed it all up, David. I hit one button, it went through all the slides super fast. Oh, look at that. Now I want to make sure I don't do that again. All right, so as I was talking about, we've kind of merged together. And, you know, your finance team and your HR team are very important to help guide the district. So the finance team, they're actually managing, what is it, about a $50 million budget? Under 50? What is our annual budget? 26 million. Oh, I'm way off. 26 million. Oh, yeah. So when we're getting up there, tens of millions of dollars they manage. 80% of your budget is then into your employees through salaries and benefits. And so the HR team is there to help take care of those people and make sure that we use those resources wisely. So one thing I want to start with to set up the context of this is that over the past 2 years, our efforts have led to a significant increase in certified staff retention. That was one of the goals that you set for us. So you can see this chart here is not based off school years. It's actually the regular calendar year. But we had a lull, and a lot of districts did go down, but we went down considerably to about 67% retention of our certified staff. That's both teachers and also would be principals, administrator, anybody that has a license from the DOE that works for us, that is included in that certified. Since the time that we've been here, we have really focused on compensation, which we know in negotiations, and we plan to do that again. Also on onboarding and developing. Onboarding is not just doing the documentation that's needed to get an employee started. We also look at it as getting them acclimated, training. Mrs. Hudson and Dr. Miller have done an excellent job with our new teachers. They do a thing where they meet with them. They also assign them mentors. We're really working with developing our staff now. The other thing was culture and climate. That, of course, was done through surveys. Also a listening tour that has been done by Mr. Yancey and other people in our organization. And then also for that, I'd have to throw in Dr. Shipley, helps us with well-being, not just of our students, but she also helps us with our staff. So focusing on those three primary areas, I think, is why we see the increase that you have right there. Now, despite our progress in staff retention, our HR and finance departments are facing critical challenges that could undermine some of the success. And so as we looked at this, some of the things that came clear to us, we still had job descriptions in our teams, workflows and responsibilities were unclear, causing operational bottlenecks and misalignment. There was also a lack of defined career pathways for these people and what was happening, and we were seeing a lot of turnover. The turnover that has happening, I think, is one of the main reasons we've had so many broken systems across HR and finance. And because those systems were broken, our processes were broken, and that meant the individualized practices were also not there. After their audit, I got really curious, and I went back through all the board minutes we've had, and we found that we've had in our central office roles of directors and support staff, 55 transitions in 5 years. That turnover, it's a revolving door, and we need to stop that. So if we don't address these, we're going to go back to not ever having these systems built out the way we need. But right now I'm going to turn over to Sandy. She's going to talk a little more about, again, the audit they did.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. So the operational audit, we really looked at the HR and the payroll department. We looked at the finance team. Really the purpose was to look across those two teams, the collaboration between those teams, the processes, and try to identify any audit findings through that. We actually came and sat on site with each employee, had them show us their processes, what they do. It allowed us to kind of job shadow them, if you will, and really watch what they were doing. One thing that we wanted to really look at was operational efficiencies. Compliance is a big one. We got to make sure from that perspective on especially the HR and the payroll side that we're compliant. Obviously employee trust, and then just, you guys being able to make decisions through the data. So those were things that we kind of looked at. Our focus areas were the job roles and their responsibilities within each roles, process efficiency, compliance, and then we did really take a deep dive on the HR structure and alignment, and that's kind of, if you guys got the full audit, you were able to see where we kind of made some suggestions on that. Starting really, like Mr. Unger said, starting really with just an org chart, job descriptions. It was very clear to me that people were not real sure what their responsibilities were, so that was pretty evident when we went through the audit. Key action items as we went through that, one is streamlining the process. There's a lot of It didn't match, for one, yeah. So we had the job description. There were things that maybe weren't on it, or they were saying, well, we're not really doing that, or we've inherited that through transition. So that's a lot, to Mr. Unger's point. There has been a lot of transition in the HR department over the last several years. So some of that is due to that. So the action items that we identified coming out, one was streamlining the process, and I think a lot of that is the technology, which, you guys have already approved that integration. You approved that last August, but to get the Power School finance, that's going to help streamline that process from onboarding through HR through payroll, and I think that's going to be a big improvement for the team's efficiencies. Implementing competitive compensation. The team specifically asked me to look at the roles, see if our recommendation on do we think different positions need to be added, or, and that's really, I'll talk about that in a minute, that's not really where I landed in the audit. I think we just really need to maybe realign some of the positions and look at the current compensation of where employees are at. Obviously, we want them to have fair pay and retain, have some stability in the departments is important, and then just have some best practices and recruitment success there. Enhance compliance with regulatory requirements and best practices. I do work with quite a few school corporations, and that is usually, compliance is always a thing that we try to make sure that, we're in a good spot there. And then improve staff training and engagement to foster some efficiency and consistency. I think there's some things that we've identified that we probably need to get out to the buildings, to our supervisors, to our principals, and do some training that kind of starts in that HR department. We did a little bit of that a couple years ago with some FMLA training and things like that, but I think we still need to probably continue to look at some of that. So these were the roles that we actually sat down. The Executive Director of HR, Human Resources Coordinator, Benefits and Employee Leave Coordinator, and then the finance positions, the Executive Director of Business Finance, the Deputy Treasurer Accounts Payable position, and then the Payroll Specialist. So we sat down with each one of them. And then we actually had some discussions with a few other people that seem to be doing some HR-related tasks. So I know, I thought that was me. I don't know. It's the school calling. Yeah. So that's kind of, we spent a lot of time with them. We even met with Kaylee and some other people that were doing some kind of HR roles, just trying to really understand where are these duties falling within the central office. So.
I'll make a real quick observation.
Yeah.
Talking about roles and description and all that. We did a proposal to do the audit. When we did the audit, we're having a brief on the audit. And it seems like some of these positions call 3 different things.
Yes.
So if we can't consistently call them the same thing, I can understand why they can't consistently do their job.
Well, yes, and that's been part of it. And like I even included in there, like what makes us certified as opposed to a classified, and then even we have non-classified, because that even gets confused around here. In HR circles, you also have non-exempt and exempt, which we call hourly and salary. And so some of that was all in this. And also, like, I went ahead and put in the proposed title on here. So I'm going to bring this title. I've already had way more discussions than I ever wanted around the word coordinator. So I recognized early on that we needed another tier. I thought maybe to put it in administrator because some of the other districts they did. So for example, a human resources coordinator in some districts was actually then a salaried position. So they would be, exempt. And when we had this audit done, I let them decide. I said, I'll trust you. And so they did the research. So in a minute, we'll be looking at that. But that's also been another problem in across our systems. People have different titles and different things. So it has been really difficult. For example, it's been difficult for me to assign trainings to instructional assistants because, again, people use different titles and different things in that. And part of this also in the report Sandy did, she said we need to start standardizing. So, we really need to make sure that our job descriptions match. And once we have them, we also have them presented to the employee by the supervisor and going through. And then later when they do their evaluation, again, I think the job description should be there as we evaluate as well. So those are all things that yes, we need to keep doing as we go through here. Also, I want to point out, too, as we look at these positions, we've already had a change recently that you had with the finance. We now have the deputy treasurer, which is filled, and also doing the accounts payable specialist. To highlight again, the report from J Benefits, they're not recommending that we add any more employees, just realigning and looking at what we're doing. And so that's a lot of what I'm going to create tonight. I think one of the most impactful things we can do to help with this challenge that we faced is actually creating this coordinator position, which will also be in the support staff category. And so we want to take it into that book. That means we'll also remove the coordinator from the administrator handbook and have these people in these roles and keep training them. We've already past couple years with the ones that we're proposing tonight, they've been trained. And I'm starting to get concerned that we might be training people and then sending them to Monroe more quickly than we want to. We don't want to have an employee here, really develop them and get them in a good spot. And then 1 to 2 years, they're now working at Monroe. So we also want to make sure, again, we may not match them, but we want to make sure that we're close. So I think this kind of matters right now is because, these roles do require decision-making, risk mitigation, and compliance and expertise that far exceeds just usual clerical responsibilities that may be even how we looked at it in the past. Also, I can tell you this, payroll and HR errors are costly, not just in money. Because of these inefficiencies, we have had to pay out contracts, we've had to have litigation, we've had to pay fees. I mean, it just racks up. It's been mind-boggling to me how much, but that's not the only cost. The other cost has been in terms of trust and also our own operational stability that's been at play in this. Also, I think by doing this, we provide, again, the clear pathways and compensation alignment, and also it will help with retention, reducing these errors, and creating this long-term stability this district needs, especially as we get ready to transition to this new software. That's going to be a huge, huge job. And these people that we're trying to keep already have been getting prepped to make sure that we do this and have these processes. See if I can. There we go. So that's part of this proposal that we're looking at tonight. We want to make sure that these people that we have in these positions, that we do this and we get this done for them. The ones that we're proposing right away is an HR coordinator, a benefits coordinator, and executive assistant to the superintendent and school board. Again, as we look at these roles, we kind of want to take away the names of the people. Sometimes that gets in the way, I think, of this. But for example, our executive assistant to the superintendent and school board, I can tell you is doing tier 1 chief of staff things too. You can kind of think of them as all being our flight controller sometimes, and especially for Mr. Yancey, to make sure to help him prioritize and know what's the focus and being that intermediary between him and the other staff. And so these things, again, go beyond just what you think of regularly as a normal administrative assistant job. By doing this, we can also ensure more accurate payroll and benefits administration. We can reduce turnover costs and also have higher operational efficiency and employee trust. So by doing these, we hope to have, again, the things that I mentioned, but we also hope that we recognize that this change requires careful planning. We get that, and also reasonable budgeting, and that's why we've also had this phased and sustainable. So you'll also notice that we put a model in your FYI packets that J Benefits helped us come up with the financial model, and then we added in the verbiage to make sure that we understand what this will mean as we do this. Because we also hope to expand this out, not to just the ones we're proposing soon, but we think we want to grow into like a payroll coordinator, also maybe one day a grant coordinator. We're learning more and more, especially as our work with ROI. There's grants out there to have, but you have to have somebody that's doing that and managing that. And there's a lot of financial responsibility and compliance that goes with that. Also included a bit of a timeline for you there. There's a timeline in there. So basically what we're doing is we're seeking from you tonight to think about this and help us. We hope that we get your support in approving these roles and salary structures. And by doing so, we can ensure that NLCS has the leadership, stability, and operational strength to sustain long-term success in HR and finance. I also think at this point it's a critical need. It's not just that this would be nice to have. And so we're hoping to be able to bring that to the next board for an actual vote on those positions. But I wanted to also give plenty of time for questions, and from me or Sandy. Sandy's here to also answer questions. Oh, and also in your appendices of the strategic plan, I went ahead and put the job descriptions with the proposed ranges in there.
If you do this, are you creating new positions, or are you just gonna take this person and say, hey, we're gonna lump this title onto you, or are you gonna make somebody reapply for all these new positions?
In this case, we've been much more proactive in making sure we post and apply and get these. In this case, we've already built up in these people, and I want to transfer them over. Because in this case, we've already invested in them, like I said. They've taken to these positions, they've grown in these positions. It would be hard for me to go out and recruit somebody. Definitely at their current salary, it would be very hard. I'd be starting from scratch, I really would. But that's why we're hoping to do this, also to retain them and make sure that we set this up. And like I said, we want to build this model right in case we need it in other areas too. So further down the road, we might need a maintenance coordinator or something like that that can help at the level. Because as he's already talked about, in operations, you're going to have to make some choices, and some of that may be in the next few years we have less directors and a few more coordinators.
We aren't really changing duties for some of this.
Yes, and some of that was it's very complex and nuanced in that before we were even using different systems, and HR has not even been in the finance system until recently, and because of that, for example, there's things where information wasn't it's separate. So like in the past, when I wanted to update an employee, I didn't do it in one spot and it went out. I had to do it in 4 spots to make sure that it was updated correctly. Also because of years, again, not blaming anybody, but we will go in and somebody did something wrong 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and it hasn't got changed or updated, and it causes an issue. Or because we had a gap in payroll people, for example, there was a drop where we didn't get the benefits right, when things recorded with IMPRIS, and that causes problems. So again, we want to stop the revolving door. We want to compensate these people fairly for the type of work they're doing, and we want to keep investing in them so that they stay here and continue this work.
Sandy mentioned earlier that, if we'd seen the full point, we're talking about the results of the audit.
Yes, JA Benefits did the audit, and then I worked with our HR team, and we developed a strategic plan, which is that's the big document that you have. But it came out from the findings. That's the audit, yes. That was the full audit they gave us, yes.
So how much work did it take you from here to go ahead and?
Well, I mean, Sandy can talk more. They actually came. Okay. But she came and they actually were on site and interviewed and talked to all our people. We also were very transparent. We turned over all the stuff that we had from before and used to analyze. I know they also went out and looked at other schools compared to ours. They also advised on our org chart that we're getting ready to, because that was another recommendation in there, was that we have a more defined org chart, not just for HR and finance, but for our whole corporation.
Fatima, you've been on board with us the whole time, and can you afford this? I just kind of look to you to say, all right, this is financially doable.
Right, like I think we do need to do something to retain those positions. Like the turnover in those seats has made fixing our bookkeeping really rough. Like most of the problems we're running into right now are directly related to errors made on the employee entry of information, including what goes in their benefits, and that's like their PERF, their TERF, their insurance, all of those deductions through the payroll side, and how intricate and complicated it is to roll that data over into Interface. So I think the level of work that we need done in these positions is higher than in other roles in the district. So I think I'd be in favor of something where we don't have payroll overturn every single year. Like everyone who's had a different opportunity in the district has left the payroll seat. Like Eileen, Tammy, the moment they get the chance, they move to a different job, because that one is a very tough, every 2 weeks, you have to do these steps on time or it goes off the rails. So in that sense, I think we do need to do something. And I think we can afford an adjustment within the operations fund, but anytime we spend in one place, we have to make adjustments somewhere else, especially with